And when we're talking about the concept of pru or vu, we always get back to the story in Bereshit where it says ki tov, that it's good. Well, what does that mean? What is the element of goodness? What's the essence of goodness? Something completing the task for which it was made. Something doing exactly what it was supposed to do. And what's the concept of blessing? The concept of blessing is making more of that something that was already good. So when you give a bracha, what you're trying to do is you're trying to say what you've already got, that's something that's good or useful or helpful, you should have even more of that. Yeah. So it's not that you should be holy or special, it's that the goodness that you've got at this moment, you should have more of that. Or the goodness that I wish for you, you should have even more of that.
You should have more of the goodness. Okay.
Now, we go on, al haaretz, over the earth, with the stabilizing sof pasuk. Not only will their needs be supplied by the ground, but they will also exert an ameliorative influence over the earth. So this is again a word that's standing by itself because we had a tipcha and then a pause. So the earth is both going to influence the animals and the animals are going to influence the earth, and it's going to sort of stand alone in that symbiotic relationship to tell you that there is stability and a separate type of success in the way that ecosystem now functions together.
I wonder why Pru or Vu doesn't have a tavir, because you would think intuitionally.
So with men, that's the way that's given. Pru or Vu is merchat tavir, and with animals, there isn't so much sheltering that's given to their multiplying, because their multiplying is to feed another species or to serve another end. So it doesn't necessarily give you that stability. That's a good point. So yes, the notes do differ. So we'll read the pasuk, and again we'll emphasize the pauses a little more than we would normally when we read. Kol hachaya asher itcha mikol basar ba'of uvavehema ubechol haremes haromes al haaretz haitzei itach vishartzu va'aretz ufaru v'ravu al haaretz. Time for a serenade. We're singing now, right? And we'll go on to the next sentence. Vayetze, and he went out, tikha. So this is going to focus us back onto what happened before and pause slightly afterwards. The commander of the ark had entered last at the time of this embarkation. He also had a role, and he went out first in order to supervise the departure of the rest of the inhabitants, as indicated by the respective shapes of the reading mark. So when we see 7:16, if we're going to go back to Noach going into the ark, we would expect him to go into the ark with which note? He's going to be the one who goes first, and everything is going to come after him. Okay. We're going to expect a mercha. So I think he's referenced the wrong sentence.
be Bar Noah in 713, page 31.
Yeah. So when he comes in, he separates out his existence from before, and he starts the flow. So we're on page 31, Genesis 7:13. Number 4. He came. That he's going to be the one who initiates this, and then we're going to skip back to our sentence now. We're on page 62, 18. By Yaitse, he's going to complete the thought of going in by going out, and he's going to be the first one to do it because he again is in charge of the whole process. So at the beginning, he separates himself out from the rest of the world and starts this process, and at the end, he's going to be the one who ends the process with a pause afterwards because he's in charge still, so he's got to stand alone as the one who is truly orchestrating the events here. Noach. So, again, we have an etnachta, and what do we predict? We predict stability. He's going to be the one doing the commands. He's going to be the one who's going to be the source of stability. He's going to tell the animals where to go. He's going to keep them in order and so on. So we expect his presence to be one of stability. Number 2, Noach gave signal, and after the music, follow the tone, and as meant by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. So we're waxing a little poetic here, but I mean basically the same thought that we would expect to be expressed by our etnachta, that Noach is the source of stability in all of this potential chaos as things. As the ark unwinds itself. So each animal is consulting with him. Each animal is going to the habitat that Noach feels is appropriate for it. They're going to go in an orderly fashion. They're not going to trample each other. Noach is in charge of all of this. So of course Noach is the stabilizing factor, and of course and the ultimate authority. So he gets an etnachta, which is stability and something to look up to. Uvanav. This is a tevir. It might be a little unclear in your text. So this is the meracha with the dot, with the sheltered dot in the middle of it. And his sons, number 3. Noach went out, and his sons followed him to assume various functions during the process of departure of the species as shown by the shape of the reading mark. So again, they're going to be a source of stability and sheltering. They're going to follow his orders. They're going to be subservient to him. But, by the way, they are going to be somebody who helps in the process as well. The ishto with the mercha. So this is lightly connected to what was before, but really focusing us on what's going to go afterwards. Noach and his sons were preoccupied with the process of unloading the ark, and his wife, who attended to the personal belongings, was charged additionally with service for the departing animals, as stressed by the directional shape of the reading mark. So, not only is his wife's connection to Noach and his sons there, but it's going to sweep into Unashevanav. So they're going to look after the household. They're going to look after the fact that there needs to be civility and order in the way that Noach and his sons and their wives are eventually going to function. And they're going to be tasked with making sure that that stability is reestablished as well. Unashevanav and wives of his sons, number 5. Everybody followed the example of Noach, and wives of his sons also found areas of contribution at this crucial stage, as denoted by the closing shape of the directional reading mark. Tipcha is going to close the phrase, so this again is all connected to the going out of the ark. So because it's all connected to going out of the ark, they all are serving functions in terms of making sure that the animals do this, and they're all taking top-down orders from Noach. And finally, the stability is ito, with him. So this is sof pasuk, and because of the tipcha before it, it's going to stand alone a little bit, and it's going to, again, provide an area of stability. As a result, all members of Noah's family were involved with him in vacating the ark. So the idea of following his concept and his idea is what gives them all this stability. So because they're all ito, they're with him, they're following his lead, this gives us the ability to end on a note that makes the process work properly. So we have several remarks here. This sentence seems to be interwoven between two neighboring sentences, indicating the participation of Noach and his family in the supervisory work over the species. So the last sentence before it is telling Noach to take out all the animals, and the next sentence after this one, Kol hachaya, kol haremes v'cholof, kol haremes al haaretz l'mishpachotam yatzu min haaretz. And all the animals went out. So Noach is told, you take them out, and the animals then all go out, and we have this sentence in between. Vayetze Noach u'banav v'ishto. So why is the sentence in between? Why shouldn't it be, take all the animals out, and then all the animals went out? What does the sentence have to do? Well, we're inferring that all of these people had tasks related to making sure this went well. So that's why we've pushed this pasuk into the middle of, you take the animals out, and yes, the animals went out. Why? Because they all had things that they were doing in order to make sure that that process helped. So that's why this sentence is in between those two sentences. Number two, or part B, I should say, remark B. The formulation of this sentence could have been different. Vayetzu Noach u'banav shehem min hateva. So it could have said, all of them went out. Vayetzu, plural, they all went out. Noach, and give a list. So why are we separating it out? Vayetze Noach. Noach went out, semicolon. Why are we pausing there? To tell that there's a command structure. Tell Noach was charged with doing this in the right way, and he was the one who was giving the orders, and ultimately it was his vision that everybody else was following. So by separating it out, rather than saying, here's a list of everybody who went out, by separating it out and saying, Noach went out, and his wife and his sons, and this, that's telling us that Noach's role is more than just one of everybody else. Puts him at the top of the command structure by putting that etnachta in the middle, by Yetze Noach. So by phrasing it this way, we see his position of command. Note number C. After the original order was given to join the wives, this sentence still separates Noach and his sons from the wife and daughters-in-law. So, you see that each of them is given tasks to do to look after the animals. When they've got tasks to do to look after the animals, they're not looking after each other because they've got each things to do that don't involve being together. So even though we had sentences before that tell us that, oh, they went out, and they rejoined each other. Well, while they're doing these tasks, they hadn't rejoined each other. And we have a couple of the commentators who come here and says that even though they were allowed to be together, they still stayed separate to be sure that this was something that was going to last. This was something that was going to stay, and perhaps to remain righteous to the idea of what was going on in the ark, and to pay a tribute to that by still staying separate at this point. G. In contrast to 8:16, 8:16 told us that you should go out. Min hateva, from the ark, is omitted, as are several other details. So, when we see that they're commanded to go out, you and your wives and your sons and their wives, itach, with you. So you see that we're losing details here. Vayetze Noach, it doesn't say he went out from the teva anymore. Why not? Teva's not the focus anymore. It's the world out there that's the focus. So the going out, we don't need to say the teva. Two of the answers might be: A, at the time when public interests are at stake, one cannot consider personal comforts. B, having seen the destruction of the previous world, the survivors hesitated to start another one. So they're staying separate in order to make sure not to repeat the mistakes from before, and maybe waiting for more advice before joining each other. And number two, they were staying focused on the task at hand rather than trying to look after personal comforts and personal needs until everything else that they had been tasked with in terms of being participants in the ark was completed.
That makes sense because you get the impression that there are two separate teams because the Nikudot, or the Tamei Mikra, mirror each other perfectly, even where the words don't mirror each other perfectly. So in 8:16, you have Ata v'Ishtecha, team 1. You have the commander who has the Revi'i, who's Noach, and Ishtecha is the one who is the Tvir, who is the first maiden major in command. In 8:18 you have 8:18, Noach Ubanav. So Noach, he's the stabilizer, but Ubanav has the Tavir immediately following him. And then in team 2 in 8:16 is Banecha Uneshe Banecha with Merchat Tikva. And team 2 in 8:18 is Vishto Uneshe Banav. And so they have identical Nikudot, but they're different teams. And what's different in the two psukim is 8:16 says Sei min hateva, Ata v'Ishtecha, team 1, Banecha Uneshe Banecha, team 2. And then 8:18 it says Vayetze Noach, but not min hateva. So I agree with you that in 8:18 he hasn't yet gone out of the teva. He is still fulfilling that duty. So it's team 1, Noach Ubanav, team 2, Ishtecha Uneshe Banecha. And in 8:16 it says when you finally go out of the teva and the teva is behind you, then your roles change and become more like the worldly roles, just as the animals are going into the world.
Again, a very considered and deliberate and considerate exiting from the teva. Yes, considerate to the animals. So we'll read the pasuk out loud. Vayetze Noach Ubanav V'Ishto Uneshe Banav Ito. I think we can do more. 8:19. Kol hachaya, each of the animal. This is with a Revi'i. Again, we said that a Revi'i is going to focus the attention on that word and tell you that that word can stand alone, can stand by itself as a singular concept. While each of the animal wild kingdom departed from the ark, Noach watched and assisted where necessary to make it smooth, as indicated by the broad meaning of the reading mark. So here we see that each animal has its own place, its own domain, its own niche, and Noach is assisting in that, but ultimately each animal is going to be the master of its own tiny little niche. It's going to be able to stand by itself there. Kol haremes with a pashta. There's two pashtot actually. We'll remember pashta always comes at the end of a word because the simple interpretation of a Hebrew word is usually mareh, is usually accent on the last syllable. However, when the word is actually pronounced mil-el, when it's pronounced with an earlier syllable accented, we get a second pashta to come to the accented syllable. So we end up with two of them on top of the word. So kol haremes, the re, the resh is the one that's going to get the accent, and the pashta that's on the sin is just there in order to tell us that this is the nature of pashta. Kol haremes. So, because we have two of them, we're going to expect some doubleness to the focusing us on this word. Equally, each of the creeper was guarded before any mishap at the disembarkation to reach its destination safely away from the ark, as shown by the double directional shape of the reading mark. So not only was his task to protect them in the ark, but to protect them as they got to their destination. They have to be taken there safely and deposited there safely. So we get two meanings to each of these things. Because this type of animal couldn't get far, couldn't necessarily get to its habitat, it needed that extra sheltering, and Noach was tasked with looking after it on the way and establishing it in its habitat. V'chol ha'of, with a katon. So this is a note that tells us that there might be more than one thing going on here, and it pauses slightly afterwards. V'chol ha'of, and each of the bird. The slow creepers and each of the bird that swiftly abandoned the ship was also observed to avoid any accident within the vivacious traffic, as pointed out by the bipartite shape of the related reading mark. So the ramus, which needed Noach to help to shelter it, the birds certainly didn't need Noach to help shelter, but there were lots of birds going out at the same time, and they still were kept safe from bumping into each other, so they still needed some intervention for their safety. So that's why we see this doubleness. They went out, but they didn't go out in a panicked way. They went out again with a little bit of the miracle of the ark following them, so they didn't all bump into each other.
Air traffic control.
Kol, most, with a tipcha. So this is going to focus us backwards and then pause after it. Most which delayed in departing were those species which could not effectively accelerate their relatively slow motion, as referred backwards by the directional shape of the reading mark. So we're talking about, okay, so what's left? Those things that went out by themselves, the chayot, established themselves, Kolaremus, Noah had to make special efforts for these things. The birds, well, they could go away quickly, but they needed some type of protection. Cool. Everything else, and the rest, the Gilligan's Island reference, and the rest, and the rest were coming out. We're coming out, and completing all of this, all of those who are going out. Romes, creeping. Number 5, advancing by creeping to vacate the ark often was delayed because of the structural difficulties, as stressed by the shape of the reading mark. So this is a munach. So munach is going to separate itself out from what's come before and move itself forward. So we've got some things that are crawling and difficult not to get trampled and so on. So they obviously needed their own timing in order to get out. So, having the elephants and the centipedes leave at the same time just wouldn't have led us to have any centipedes. So they had to go out obviously at a time separated from everything else, and that's why we have the munach, which separates things from other things, and yet allows them to continue on. Al haaretz, over the earth, with the stabilizing etnachta. Besides their slow pace of mobility, their advancing was frequently interfered with the various formations of objects over the earth, which had to be first circumvented before the course could be corrected, as denoted by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. So, in order for them to get to where they had to be, they have to negotiate various places, and the land helped in this task as well. Again, something that nobody necessarily addresses. How did these animals manage to get to places that were remote and far, and through places that were inhospitable and so on? So here we see that the Aretz, the land, is acting as a stabilizing factor by allowing some of these things to happen. Lemishpechotehem, for their families. So this has a zakef katon, a munach and a katon on the same word. So we have to realize we've got separating itself out from what comes before, going on, and then stopping and having more than one meaning. We've got lots of parts to this note. Nevertheless, all species were assisted in searching for their families and joining them for companionship and multiplication, as suggested by the shapes of the two reading marks. So, each family is going to be a species in and of itself. It's going to separate itself out from the other species. And then we're going to end up with more of them. We've got a three-part note. We've got a munach and a katon with two extra parts. So we're going to end up with more of them afterwards because they've stayed together as a unit, separate from everything else, and managed to multiply and make lots of that unit. So that's why we have this three-part note separated out from everything else. So we see the beauty of that. We see why it needed all of those elements to be on the one word.
I wonder too, I'm looking at the word remes. Remes in 8:15
Yep.
has a tavir, and remes in 8:19 has like a double pashta. I forget what that's called.
Shtei pashtot.
So it's a double pashta. And I wonder, remes may mean the creepy crawlers that we can see, but I also wonder about like paramecia and bacteria and other kinds of creepy crawlers that are microscopic, not macroscopic, and are often held in the bodies of others. So you have sort of two families. So in 8:15, I wonder if Bechol HaRemes also includes the species that live inside other host species.
Not 8:15. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Right. 8:17. Sorry. So I'm wondering if Bad Behema Bechol HaRemes, it's a tavir because some of these remasim need a host body to live in and to make their move, to be able to lishrutz. And then when you go to 8:19 and you see Kol HaRemes, that you have your two families, your microscopic and your macroscopic, the ones that can actually negotiate the earth, and those that need a host as a vector.
Again, we see the elements of sheltering and doubleness, and certainly there's no single answer as to what's right here. But we see that quite obviously both of those elements are portrayed by the notes. Number 8, Yatsu, they went out. We're on page 63, 819, with a tipcha. So this is going to focus us backwards and then pause slightly afterwards. So all of the animals, Lemishpachotehem, joined in their individual family units, multiplied in those family units. Yatsu, they went out. After units were reestablished, they became linked again to share their common goals, and they went out to resume their normal life and regular predestined functions, as expressed by the reverse direction of the reading mark. So they're looking back towards literally the way that they were created once they were reestablished in their units, in their habitat. And then we pause with the tipcha, min ha-teva, from the box. Where do we get back to the teva?
Yeah,
Why do we need to mention that
that's what
they're
I
all
was
out?
wondering.
Why do we got to get back
We
to the
already
teva?
established that the
What's
boxes
the
are
stability
teva?
that the teva is providing here? Separated out from everything else by the tipcha with pause. All species adapted themselves to various environments to live a free life away from the box and its constraints. So the life that they're living, Yatsu, that's it, they're out. Mina teva. No more of the nature of the teva in them. The teva is now completely separate from them. Tipcha, pause. Mina teva. The ark in and of itself was a miraculous bubble, and they're not there anymore.
But I thought we established that in 8:16, the last time we say to leave from the box. I thought that was, it's behind us, we're now going forward. So why does
No.
it mention
The
begin?
8:16 is telling them that's what you should do.
Right.
You should go out.
Mm.
Now we're saying they went out.
You
And
are.
when they went out,
And left it all behind.
their re-established family units are separated out completely from the Teva. That pause after the Tifcha tells us, Yatsu, they went out, and the Teva's over there. Them and their family units are here, the Teva and its different rules of nature are over there, they're separated now. And the Teva and its stability is something else. That's not what they have anymore. And we read the pasuk out loud.